For years, Amelia Warner had been the picture of quiet strength, graceful, private, untouched by the chaos that surrounded her husband's fame. While the world speculated, analyzed, and obsessed over the undeniable chemistry between Jamie Dornan and Dakota Johnson, Amelia stayed silent. She never lashed out, never corrected the headlines, never tried to prove anything. But silence, no matter how noble, has a way of turning into its own kind of story. It started back in 2015, when 50 Shades of Grey turned Jamie Dornan and Dakota Johnson into one of Hollywood's most talked-about pairs. Their on-screen intimacy was so real, their connection so effortless, that audiences began to believe it had to be more than acting. Interviews were dissected frame by frame, every glance and every laugh between them labeled evidence. And through it all, Amelia, Jamie's wife, watched from the background, her composure becoming its own kind of mystery. At first, the rumors didn't bother her. She understood the business. She had been in the industry herself. But as the years passed and the films continued, the whispers grew louder. There's something between them. Amelia must be heartbroken. Dakota and Jamie can't hide it anymore. Those words filled tabloids and comment sections, while Amelia quietly raised their 3 daughters, keeping her distance from the storm. Every now and then, the media tried to get a reaction. Paparazzi followed her at school runs, at grocery stores, even on family holidays. Headlines called her the forgotten woman, or Hollywood's most patient wife. But those close to her knew better. Amelia wasn't passive. She was choosing peace, protecting her home from the noise outside. She's always been incredibly grounded, one friend once said. She doesn't play games. She believes the truth doesn't need defending. Still, the truth has a way of finding its voice. In early 2025, Amelia agreed to appear on a podcast, her first public interview in years. The episode was meant to focus on her music and motherhood, not her marriage. But everyone knew the question was coming. Halfway through the recording, the host hesitated before asking what the world had been waiting to hear. You've stayed silent for so long about the rumors between Jamie and Dakota Johnson. How did it really feel, and did you ever believe there was something real between them? There was a pause. Amelia smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides 100 emotions. She looked down for a moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass before she finally spoke. I knew this question would come, she said softly. And I suppose after all this time, I should answer it. The studio fell silent. Even the host didn't breathe. For years, people have told their own version of my life, Amelia continued. I've heard every story. That I was jealous, that I was blind, that I was angry. The truth is, I wasn't any of those things. I was just human. Her voice was calm, but the weight of her words was undeniable. When you love someone, and you see them share a deep connection with another person, it hurts. Of course it does, but pain doesn't always mean betrayal. Sometimes it just means life isn't as simple as people want it to be. She stopped for a moment, as if deciding how much of herself to reveal. I always knew what Jamie and Dakota had, she said finally. It was real, but not in the way people think. It wasn't an affair or a secret romance. It was trust. They went through something extraordinary together. And unless you've lived that kind of pressure, you can't understand how 2 people might cling to each other just to stay sane. Her answer wasn't defensive or bitter. It was honest, painfully honest. There were moments when I felt invisible, Amelia admitted quietly. When it seemed like the world forgot who I was and who he was beyond the screen. But Jamie never lied to me. He was always transparent about what that relationship meant to him. I just had to find my peace with it. The host, visibly moved, asked, so you never doubted him? Amelia smiled again, a sad, knowing smile. Doubt and love can exist in the same heart, she said. But so can forgiveness. That single line would later flood social media, quoted by millions who saw in her words the quiet strength of a woman choosing grace over resentment. But in that moment, it wasn't about being poetic or profound. It was simply her truth, unfiltered, unguarded, and long overdue. As the episode neared its end, The host asked one final question. If you could tell the world one thing about Jamie and Dakota, what would it be? Amelia took a deep breath. That what they shared was beautiful, but not ours to judge. People mistake understanding for approval. I can understand something without needing to control it. The host thanked her, and the recording ended. But Amelia wasn't finished. As she stood up, she looked directly at the camera that had been recording the session and said quietly, almost to herself, "Sometimes the truth doesn't destroy a story. It ends it." The clip went viral within hours. After years of silence, Amelia Warner had finally spoken, and instead of fanning the flames, she extinguished them. But the full impact of her words, and the reaction from both Jamie and Dakota, was still to come. The world didn't just listen, it erupted. Within hours of Amelia Warner's podcast episode airing, headlines flooded every corner of the internet. Amelia finally breaks her silence. She admits Jamie and Dakota had a real connection. Social media exploded with sympathy, admiration, and disbelief. Some praised her honesty, calling her grace personified. Others twisted her words, claiming she had confirmed what fans had always suspected, that something had happened between Jamie Dornan and Dakota Johnson. But Amelia didn't flinch. While the noise outside grew louder, she remained calm. Her truth had been spoken, and she wasn't interested in defending it. She had said what she needed to say, not to win an argument, but to finally put the story to rest. Still, for Jamie, the moment hit differently. He was on set in Prague when the podcast aired. His phone buzzed non-stop, messages from his team, his friends, and even his co-stars. At first, he didn't want to listen. He was afraid of what he might hear. But that evening, sitting alone in his trailer, he pressed play. As Amelia's voice filled the room, he closed his eyes. Every word she spoke was calm, steady, and filled with quiet strength, the same kind of strength that had held their family together through years of scrutiny. When she said, "It hurts, but pain doesn't always mean betrayal," his throat tightened. By the time she reached the line, "I can understand something without needing to control it," tears were already welling in his eyes. "She's incredible," he whispered to himself. "She's always been incredible." Later that night, he called her. No scripts, no rehearsed words, just silence at first. Then, quietly, he said, "Thank you." "For what?" she asked gently. "For being kinder than I deserved," he said. Amelia paused for a moment. "You deserved honesty, Jamie. That's all I gave." The next day, reporters caught up to Jamie outside the studio. "Have you heard Amelia's interview?" one shouted. "Do you agree with what she said?" Jamie stopped, adjusted his jacket, and looked directly into the cameras. His expression was calm but emotional. "I heard it," he said. "And I think what she did took courage. Amelia's been the strongest person in this entire story. She's always understood me better than anyone, even when I didn't understand myself." Those words went viral again. But this time, something shifted. The headlines began to soften. The narrative changed from scandal to admiration, from betrayal to forgiveness. Meanwhile, Dakota Johnson also heard the interview. She was in New York, promoting a film, when her assistant handed her the transcript. At first, she hesitated to read it, worried about how Amelia might have portrayed her. But when she did, her eyes filled with tears. In a later interview, Dakota was asked about Amelia's comments. Her response was simple but heartfelt. Amelia didn't have to say those things. She didn't owe anyone an explanation. But what she said, it shows the kind of woman she is. Strong, kind, and full of grace. I respect her more than words can say. That single statement silenced even the harshest critics. For the first time in nearly a decade, the love triangle that had existed only in speculation began to dissolve. What remained wasn't bitterness or denial, it was understanding. A week later, Amelia released a short written statement through her publicist. It wasn't dramatic or defensive, just 4 simple sentences. "The truth is never simple. I've said what I needed to say. I hold no resentment toward anyone, only gratitude for the lessons and the love. My family is my peace. Fans flooded her social media with messages of support. "You handled this with so much dignity," one comment read. Another said, "You just taught the world what forgiveness really looks like." Behind the scenes, Amelia and Jamie quietly reconnected. They weren't trying to rewrite their story, just to understand it better. One evening, while putting their daughters to bed, Jamie told Amelia, "You know, I think you healed something not just in me, but in all of us." She smiled softly. "Maybe the only way to end a story like this," she said, "is with truth." And that became their piece. Weeks later, Amelia was asked one final question in another interview. If you could go back to those years when the rumors were at their worst, would you have spoken sooner? She thought for a long moment before answering. "No," she said, "because I wasn't ready then. Silence protected me until I was strong enough to speak. And when I finally did, I wasn't speaking to the world. I was speaking to myself." That answer became the headline the world hadn't expected but needed. Amelia Warner didn't expose a scandal, she ended one. And maybe that's what made her story so powerful. Because in a world that feeds on drama, Amelia Warner had done the rarest thing. She told the truth, and she did it with grace. In the end, her words didn't divide. They healed. And for the first time in years, all three names, Jamie Dornan, Dakota Johnson, and Amelia Warner, were mentioned not in rumors, but in respect.